Hello, hello. It's Elizabeth Busby here, and welcome to Discerning Marriage. So I just finished recording the video with my guest today, and I wanted to give you a bit of an intro to it because the discernment story that this man is sharing with us is so simple and so beautiful. And in so many ways, it is the story that all of us who are raising children want our children to have. There is a simplicity and a beauty, a lack of drama, just a wholesomeness about this man's story. And it's so uncommon to hear incredible, simple stories today. There's so much drama. We are like a drama-sated culture. Like we are going after the clickbaits, we're going after the dramatic things, we're going after like the really heavy entertainment. And really, the Lord is a simple Lord. God is so simple. And so there's something really beautiful about getting to witness the simplicity of a discernment that is just naturally ordered. It unfolds really beautifully. It was so beautiful. And so I wanted to kind of frame that for you because I think this one is going to be something that over the course of your discernment, as you are discerning marriage, or if you're a parent and you're helping your kiddos discern marriage, this one is going to slowly get into your heart and help you to see the beauty that can happen when we're able to live a simple life. So appropriately, his handle is The Simple Catholic. His name is Matt. Please join me in welcoming Matt to the show. Hi, Matt.
Hi, Elizabeth. Thanks for inviting me on.
Thank you so much. So I want to get to your discernment story, but you were about to tell me before we push record about the background of your apostolate name, The Simple Catholic. So if you want to share with everyone who you are, what you do, and kind of where that name came from, your handle, all of that, I would love to hear it.
Yeah, so I started my blog in 2015. It had a different name then. It was more of a clunky name than it is now. And it was in that time where I just had this discernment. I saw so much of the church, like at least online, people were politicizing the church. And I just believe, that we're just Catholic. We should just be Catholic and live out our faith. So I just had this, I don't know if it was there wasn't a specific moment, but it was just like this time where it's just like, I'm Catholic. I'm just simply Catholic. And the name just kind of flowed from there. And then also, having children helped me, force me to simplify the faith and teaching them in a way, going from studying for a master's degree in theology and having that great love and desire for the theology in a very academic way to then being a parent simultaneous to that. I had this not a tension, but just this balancing act of that. And it just came across to that name. It just kind of settled and I was at peace with that name. And yeah, that's kind of the story about that.
I love it. All right. So it started as a blog in 2015 and then came over into Instagram. And it's been really successful. You have quite a following. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, thank you. I did not expect that. It just kind of developed, and I just been originally just posting, funny, inspiring content that helped me through very difficult times in life. And it just, people found it relatable, and I continue to share it.
Praise God. He's so good. I love digital missionaries and the surrender they have to the Lord's providence and the Lord's giftedness with all of the following. It just is so wonderful. All right. So let's shift to talk about your marriage. So how long have you been married? How many kiddos do you have? How old are they? Any of those fun details?
Okay. Yeah. So married since 2010. So just celebrated our 15th anniversary this summer.
Nice. Congratulations.
And thank you. So my wife, Jennifer, and I have 4 kids. Oldest is Noah, who's 14. Second oldest is Amelia. She just turned 12. Then our third is Josiah. He's 9. And our youngest is 6, going to be 7 at the end of the year.
Oh, so cute. I love it. So sweet. All right. So how did you know that you were called to marriage, broadly speaking? I find that's really helpful for people to hear.
I just knew. And I know that doesn't really, answer it.
Some people have that. Yeah. Tell me about it.
I just knew. And I think the more I hear stories about the saints specifically, when they are called to certain things, they just knew. So this is something I just literally learned. And I'll connect it kind of back to marriage, but I just learned this yesterday from a homily that the priest had for daily mass, he mentioned Saint Margaret Mary. And I didn't know about this. He also just recently learned about it. So he shared with us the fact that when she was 4 years old, she took a vow of chastity. So, which, you don't hear that too often from even the saints, to know that she knew that she was pledged to be married to God in that consecrated special way from a very young age. And so going back to kind of my story, I knew I wanted to be a dad when I was 7. I remember writing a note, and my dad kept it. And I wrote a note saying that when I got married and got my first house, I would invite my parents over, and I think I would give them pizza, tacos, blueberries, and strawberries. My dad actually kept it. He kept it in lockbox.
That is so cute. I love that he kept that. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Oh, that's precious. Yeah. So you had this desire just from an early age for physical fatherhood. And you just, that didn't waver. Even into your adolescence, college, young adulthood, you just had that confidence the whole time?
Yeah, I mean, it's something I didn't really consciously think of, throughout high school and my mid. But I just remember that distinct moment in when I was 7. I wrote it out, and I just knew. I think I knew. And so when I went to college, I knew that I wanted to. I never dated anyone ever before.
Nice.
I didn't date in high school. Nice. My family, there's none of my cousins really dated either in high school. So I don't know if that was part of the reason where I just never felt the need to date either. I never felt pressure from my parents either about that. My grandpa and grandma meant to say, they were married, at the time when I was growing up, 40 years, 50 years. And so they eventually had, I think they were married 66 or 67 years before my grandpa passed away. So we knew, we just had that example in front of us. And, my dad and my mom, my uncles and aunts, and their spouses. So we just had that in front of us. We had, lots of cousins. We would go to my grandparents' house. It felt monthly growing up. Maybe it wasn't. I in my head canon of memory, it was every single month.
Wow.
It may have not been that, but it just felt that every single month. And just having that, I think, was probably formative in that there wasn't any intellectual decision this is the reason why that. But I think from an instinctual, spiritual point of view, that was maybe part of the reason I felt called to marriage, maybe at a young age. It was probably, first and foremost, it was probably my parents' example. Oh. And then secondarily, it was my aunts and uncles, and just knowing that's what you do. And then when I got to college, I just had in my mind, I want to find my spouse. And so that's what happened. And on September 7th, went on the 2007, I think, maybe, or 2007. Nice. Asked my wife out, and we went on our first date. And then 2 months later, I knew she was the one.
Well, actually, pause. Yeah. I want to get to that, but there's a couple things I want to highlight from your growing up story that I find really fascinating. Number one, did you grow up Catholic?
Yes. So cradle Catholic, and, Catholic in the sense that we did go to mass every single week. We did, nice. My mom would take us to Stations of the Cross during Lent. To me, wow. Those are, the core memories of my, childhood were playing, outside with my brother and sister and neighborhood kids, baseball or wiffle ball, and going to Station of the Cross. I remember that was I just really loved that time, growing up. And I love that devotion. We would pray the rosary. It wasn't every day, and maybe it wasn't even every month, but we prayed it, and I had enough to know what that was. And we would pray, I think as I was maybe in my middle school years, we'd pray maybe once a month. With that, we always went to mass. We never felt pressure to go to mass. It was just shown to us that that's what we do. My parents aren't, theologians or have any advanced degrees in terms of apologetics or anything like that. So, like, there was so much more to the faith that I eventually learned and knew, but like from just following the church and living it out, they gave it to me. I remember we would, I think there's a Carmelite monastery in my hometown.
Nice.
And my mom would take us there a couple times. I mean, I don't know how often, and I don't know if she remembers even, but it was enough where, that was a core memory that I have. We have a shrine that's in our hometown that has like a, large statue of Jesus and Mary, and there's a lot of other things there. So like we would visit that often. And, even in the things that we didn't do that weren't like overtly Catholic, just going to our grandparents' house, having, a lot of cousin time, letting us just be and like play. And she had like a great balance where I don't know, like she really, I think, parented well. And I had a really good childhood. And we did go to Catholic school, and, I'm sure that's, maybe part of it too. But, I think it was mostly just the example my parents gave me and their love that they showed between each other. I just remember that there was, my dad's a very patient man, he's not perfect, obviously, but, and my mom, you just did a great job, I think, teaching us the faith in a way that, I don't know, she really never forced it. She showed us the faith. And so,
so awesome.
So it's very interesting.
So John Paul II, when he talks about his design for marriage preparation, includes the time where a child is growing up in their home as part of their marriage prep. He calls it remote preparation. And what you are describing is like, I think, his heart, his vision for it, right? Like a child grows up in a home that is Catholic and that is life-giving, and they're around their parents and a bunch of other stable marriages, grandparents, aunts, uncles. They're just soaking in the beauty of God's design for marriage. And it's not even like a textbook education. It's like you're just absorbing it like a sponge. Every child is a sponge. So what you're absorbing is good and unwholesome. And that helped form you for your own vocation. And I'm also so fascinated that you didn't date in high school, even though you had this desire for marriage. And you said it wasn't like a rule that they put on you. You just didn't have the push to do it.
I didn't have any ambition. I mean, maybe it was I was shy. I don't really know. I can't really pinpoint any reason. I mean, I was involved in a lot of different activities in school too. And, like music and did some cross country and track. So I don't know if that was a component. I just never felt the need to. And I think maybe it was due to like seeing my older cousins not really date. Like none of them dated.
Nice.
None of them dated ever.
So awesome.
I mean, some of the younger ones did, I guess, start to date, but it was like minimal. And I think even my younger cousins that I'm younger by I'm older than them by like maybe 14 years, they have dated in high school, but like they eventually married their person that they dated. So it's just, so like, and so I dated my wife in college and we ended up getting married. So like, I don't know if it's just what I saw my parents do. My dad didn't date anyone. He was older when he got married.
Nice.
He was like 35. And so I don't remember any stories about him dating either. So I think that was part of the reason. And the fact that, my cousins never seeing that as an option either. And, I saw, and I guess a third degree, I guess, of noticing people that were always dating in school. There was always like hopping around. Like it just seemed very interesting in middle school dating. It's just like you have 20 that you date. I mean, it just seems it just seemed kind of silly to me.
I'm so glad.
I I didn't really, say that, but like there were
Sure.
a couple times I think where I just thought like that seemed kind of silly.
I would agree with you. And so
Yeah.
like to use kind of different language that I like to use, like you had your circle of influence that was your family, but then also your cousins, like your broader circle of influence. And because they weren't doing this, you decided not to do it, right? It was like the product of what you were surrounded by. And you were surrounded by such good influences that allowed you to really enjoy your childhood, enjoy your adolescence, pour into the activities that you liked, not spend your time on kind of frivolous, silly, romantic interactions, right? That kind of really take away from the opportunity to enjoy that one precious childhood that you have. I am like super delighted by this story. As you guys who are watching are probably realizing, I didn't know this stuff in advance. I'm discovering this with y'all. So I have so many like people who follow my stuff know that I have opinions on teen dating, and that dating is to discern marriage. If you're not ready to discern marriage, don't do it. It can be so dramatic and so painful. And anyway, I'm just so delighted by your story. I'm like, now I want to like talk to your mom. Like, I want your mom to come on my podcast, because like how neat is it that you were just like raised in this environment that set you up for such incredible success. So now let's go on to meeting your spouse. So you went to college and you realize on some level that you were ready to marry. Like, like you were in a place where discerning marriage was a reasonable thing to do, no longer silly, right? Mm-hmm. And then, okay, September 7th, I love that you know that date. What happened on that date? Like, was there, like, how do you remember that date specifically? I love it.
Well, I think, so I asked her out maybe on the 31st, and that was the year of 2007. So I think it was my sophomore year, so her junior year.
Nice.
And I think, it would have been my sophomore year. So, and then I think we went out the next week, or either we had an unofficial date, and then the 7th was like, we decide that's our official first date.
So cute.
And so we just picked that. And then, that was our, first date. So, and we, sometimes we'll celebrate that. I think we saw Hairspray as a movie.
Oh, cute.
And then we went to Chili's, in Sioux City, Iowa for dinner. And then like I knew early on, like I think I met Jenny, my wife, when I was a freshman, and It was at the cafeteria was where I could kind of initially met her. And there was a big table where basically there was like 7 tables just pushed together, and it formed the big table.
Nice.
And
must have been
this was a collection of people. And I think the big table, I really see it as a metaphor for the church. I didn't really come up, see that concept right away. But looking back, it is the metaphor for the church, the big table. And there were a lot of people there. There were people from cross country, people from music, drama. And I think there's probably a lot of people that had ADHD in that table. And that's maybe what drew me. I was very shy, and that was when I was in high school, very shy. And in college, I that was a year where I was very much, I guess, extroverted, I guess, in a sense. I'm now gone back to kind of my default of being introverted, but everything was so new in that experience. I didn't really have a ton of friends growing up. I was very introverted. I had, cousins and my brother and sister. But I have a ton of it. I didn't really hang out at a ton of people's houses in high school, but that's where I developed some good friendships. I maintained, several of those friendships, even to today, from people that I met at college, a handful of them. So I think that was really formative in there. And then my wife was very loud at the big table, and she was very bursting with energy. And she's now diagnosed with ADHD, but she wasn't at the time. And I think in hindsight, that might have been maybe why I was drawn to her. Her just energy and her zest for life, and opposites kind of attract. So I was
gonna say,
he really cares about my joy. And there's other friends that had similar experiences. Like one of our best friends that, she was roommates with his wife in college, and they were in our wedding party. he is very much an extrovert, and so I'm drawn to him due to that, and he'll bring out, the best in me, and it's just very interesting how, surrounding myself with those people, they kind of brought out the energy that I have, but I don't have, I guess, sometimes naturally. And so I was just drawn to her. She's very loud, very zestful. And then I kind of I started messaging her on Facebook throughout the summer.
Nice.
And then then it kind of just developed there. And then I actually broke up with her a week into it because I'm like, there's no way that, because I was also discerning the priesthood at this time too.
Oh,
and
okay.
and I was like, I wasn't sure. I was like, there's no way someone can know this early on that they're the one. And so I was out of fear, and then also thinking I was called to the priesthood too. And so woke up with her for a few days, and then went back, out again. And then fine, I told her I loved her, and 2 months in, and at that point I knew I wanted to marry her. And this is where my memory kind of fades a little bit. I don't know if I think I asked her out on her birthday and this might maybe the following year, I think, that we got engaged. I think that's the case. That's where my memory fades. But I knew early on that she was the one 2 months in. And it's just and in hindsight, it was probably really that first week, I kind of knew, officially, if you want to be official, I thought it in my mind and intellect 2 months in.
Okay.
But I think instinctually, spiritually, it was probably a week in. I was like, there's no way someone knows that. But there is a way, because now I'm hearing stories about, St. Margaret Mary. She knew at age 4. There's no way. St. Therese of Lisieux knew at age 5. There's no way, but there is a way. And looking back at, reading St. John Paul II's life, I've read some biographies. There was a little story that I, read my kids, and I think it's from Ignatius Press, but it talked about he was prepared his whole life to be Pope. Mm-hmm. I was prepared my whole life to be married, and that's my, my role. And so it's just very fascinating with your vocation. And I'm, this is not necessarily directly tied to marriage, but is, I think, related in the sense that I'm also feeling a calling to join a third order religious, whether that's Carmelite or Franciscan. And it's this year I'm starting to be more overt. I haven't told my wife anything about this because part of the thing too is the fear. I'm am I just doing this, to, just out of my own desire? But it's interesting, the things that are put on your heart, God will grow those. And he called St. Peter. Looking in the gospel with the rashness, the ambition, the zest that Peter had, it made sense that he would be the first pope, even though in some cases it doesn't make sense. But right. God works in a mystery where, it made sense. He's from an early age, or early time, Jesus, obviously knew that, Peter was called, and, maybe Peter was also knew, just I knew, or some of these other individuals knew that their calling was. But it's very, very interesting. The more I reflect on it, that I was prepared for this moment. And, the formative, I can go all the way back to when I was 7 years old. I just knew. And it was and maybe it was because I was a 7-year-old, and, kids will say things with great confidence. But
grace is real, though. Grace is real.
And
what I think too is when you, and again, I think in a lot of ways it seems like you were very much preserved from a lot of the dangers of the world, a lot of dangers of adolescence, and the incredible family you had, the grace of your parents' marriage, your grandparents' marriage. Like there's like so much grace, it seems like, flowing in your childhood home. But what I think is awesome is the Lord absolutely gives graces like that. Like you hear Louie and Zelly's story where she heard like, this is the one I've chosen for you, right? Like it totally happens. I think it's an extraordinary grace. I don't think ordinarily it happens, but I do think you can dispose yourself to receive those kinds of graces. And I think you did that by not just frivolously dating. Like you didn't have all of these wounds that you'd collected along the way from being in all sorts of like not serious relationships, even with like physical intimacy going really far, like just all the things that comes with adolescent dating or dating when you're not intentionally discerning marriage. And it just causes so much woundedness that makes it hard to hear the Lord. But you didn't have any of that because, you know, I'm sure you had other things, but you didn't have in this area of your heart these blocks to hearing the Lord. So you were able to allow your discernment to just be this simple, beautiful process. And I am delighted by this story. This is so fun. So you were, okay, discerning the priesthood, though I skipped that question. I normally ask about it, but because of your conviction from childhood, I didn't ask about priesthood, but you did discern the priesthood, it sounds like, in college.
Yeah, and it wasn't a ton, but like one of my priests at the parish I grew up in, I think he also maybe felt that I was called to that. So there was some like desire, what's the word? Like not push, but like influence there.
Sure. He was guiding you, suggesting it.
Yeah. And I think part of it too is maybe it was a precursor to my eventual, studying theology at a more academic level. I ended up getting my master's degree in theology. I think that was probably one of those desires for like why I wanted to be a priest. And, and maybe I just I don't know, and maybe there was a true calling at that time where it's like, because I did really feel like I was called to that as well. And I think part of that was as a reaction to the fact that like, there's no way someone can know that their vocation this quick. So I tried to like overcorrect it and go that way. Now, I do have a cousin that is a priest, and we very much have the same type of analytical mind, and like we get very much along. Like I would, he was one of the handful of cousins that I would just naturally have a good rapport with.
Nice.
He wasn't in the priest or the seminary yet at that point, but like it's very interesting where when I got engaged, he was just joining the seminary, and like he was a few years older than me. He eventually he said he was a deacon, transitional deacon at our wedding. Okay. He became our oldest child's godson, and so like I think maybe there's a current there, but it's very interesting where
that's sweet.
And maybe that was one reason that I thought, because our brains are very much like the same wired, very much. We love theology. We're very much analytical. We'll talk this. We're almost like brothers in a sense. There's sometimes where the way he thinks, is even closer to how my own brother thinks, even though my brother and I think very much alike too. It's just my cousin, there's just that, I think, academic closeness and desire for like, we love the faith so much that way. So maybe that was going, through that. But I think the main thing was like, I just felt there's no way, you can know that you're called to marry someone this soon, this early, this naturally. Yeah. And I was like afraid, I'm like, there's no way. There's no way. I even said that phrase in my head, like, there's no way, God. There's no way.
But sometimes he just gives that grace. Yeah. He gave it to you. And it's neat to see that you and your cousin have such similar personalities, but the Lord can use that personhood. You're unique people, but you have those similar gifts in both priesthood and marriage, right? The Lord can allow that fruitfulness to flourish in either vocation. So that's right. So neat. Okay, so I want to go back to this how you knew you wanted to marry her. So obviously you did just have this sense, but also there were some tangible things, of course, that made you be like, yeah, I could be really happy with this woman. So the opposite, you mentioned that, like the energy, the zest, like you were introverted and shy, and she was not that extroverted. It sounds like she was extroverted, and she was boisterous, and she was not shy. What is the opposite of shy? I don't actually think I know that, but It wasn't Jenny. Jenny wasn't that. So that piece of it. But was there anything else about her that made you be like, yeah, I'm going to marry this woman?
We had a lot of, shared interests. She was she was in RCA, which is now called
nice.
OCA, with the change, but it was called RCA at the time. She was already discerning to, join the church already. So she already had a great faith foundation. I think maybe in hindsight, the fact that she already had a strong devotion to the Eucharist. Growing up, she's a Lutheran, but she would tell, say, from time to time when we're early, and even now, she'll kind of mention in passing that she always believed that it was the real presence. And when she heard that it wasn't, she was taken aback. And then she looked into becoming Catholic when she was a freshman. And this was this tragedy that happened to her friend. Her friend committed suicide, and he was her best friend in high school. They did a lot of drama stuff, and she was in a theology class, and this was at a Catholic, college that we went to. But the person that taught it said that he was going to hell, and she's like, "There's no way." There's no way that a good and loving God could do that, and
that's not the church's teaching, by the way, people. In case you've heard that from anybody, that is not the church's teaching. We serve a merciful God. It's definitely not. And it's very Protestant understanding, but it is not the Catholic Church's teaching.
And she challenged this person in the instructor, and the instructor just stood steadfast. And so she went to study, looking at the catechism. And I think eventually, the instructor apologized, or there was some reconciliation. I don't know if there was much official reconciliation there, but she then developed a devotion to the Divine Mercy. So Saint Maria Faustina became her eventual confirmation saint, and she already by the time I dated her, she was already Catholic. She was not officially in terms of going through the process yet. It was later that school year, but she had a great devotion, and I think she was surrounded by the people that were surrounded her by, that was the right group of people too. So I think it's very important, the friend group that your future spouse is part of. Yes. It's very much, not everyone is together now. There has been, people move and there's changes, but we have two of our really good friends are a married couple, and our kids are very much the same age. They're just a year difference. We started 1 year earlier. Cute. And then they basically have, kids that are 1 year less than our kids. But that I think was very important too. The fact that we had shared interests, we both enjoyed reading. Her faith was very important. Her father is very, humble, and just going into that, she gets such, and then I think, she has such a great relationship with my mom. They'll talk every single day. They talk more than I talk to my mom, and I talk to my mom a couple times a week. But in a sense that, it's very important, I think, to find someone that it's you're gonna marry your spouse first. That's the most important. But to have their family and friends also that you love them, and her dad is tied for the most patient man I know besides my own dad. But there's times where it's he is the most patient man and genuine person in existence. And I think that probably helped his fatherhood kind of shaped her in a sense. And she's adopted, but and so she didn't know anything about her birth parents, but that to me was very impactful, I think, maybe to her growing up with just having her dad being very loving, and they have a still good relationship. And, I think, there's so many things, obviously shared interests, I was attracted to her physically too. That helps. But I think it was the fact that, her faith was important, we had a shared friend group and her energy. And I think that it made sense, like, neurodivergent people are naturally going to, kind of be like magnets, come to each other. And even now, like when I'm finding people on Instagram and I find that they're neurodivergent, it's like, that's why I like your content. That's why when I message you, I know, like, there's a gentleman that I just spoke to, and we've been following each other's accounts for like months now. He just got a diagnosis for ADHD, and he was chatting with me over the phone, and like the struggles that he deals with, like, I know. And like, I think the shared or similar type of way of thinking just attracts, with spouses, and then, with friendship too. So it was all of that. And the sense that, like, I kind of just had good examples of marriage. And I think I just made a decision. It was a decision of the will. I was going to get married and find my spouse. That was the summer going into my freshman year, or sophomore year of college. And so that was, I just decided, and God, I think, ultimately gave the grace to, like, when you make a decision and like that, and it doesn't always happen that quick, that's, I think, each situation is going to be different, but there are times where it's very, like, pretty quick decision.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Also, I made that excited face because one of my children is adopted. And so I love hearing stories of adoptees who have beautiful, thriving adult lives. I know a number of them, but every single time it's like fresh delight for me. So that's why I made that face when you said Jenny was adopted. That's so awesome. And so beautiful. Okay. So I love this too, that conviction of making a decision. I think that it can be so challenging for our brains when we don't know what we want to do. And we're like trying to kind of figure it out. And so much of our energy goes into that discernment of this or that or this or that. So the conviction of like, I'm going to get married and I'm going to pursue this. And even it sounds like when you had such a strong feeling about her, and then you were like, whoa, maybe it's not real. And you took a step back. You only discerned, it sounds like, the priesthood in that 1 week. And then you came back and you're like, no, this is it. Like, you'd made this decision and she was such a good fit that you were like, okay, I'm coming back and I'm pursuing this. Otherwise, it may have ended up being that discernment of the priesthood may have ended up being a long time. But it sounds like with this conviction that you had, you were able to kind of come back and be grounded in that. That's awesome.
Yes, definitely. And I think, and maybe it was the prayers of the friends that are around us as well. I mean, that certainly could be the case. But yeah, it's just, I think when you make that decision and knowing that, whatever God's will, and I've been more intentional in the last, like, probably 2 years, anytime when it comes to other, like, things I'm discerning, to realize, like, okay, is it God's will? And like, there's been various, like, work things that come up with, and I'm like, sometimes I'll have that same feeling or a similar feeling, maybe not the same intensity, but it's like, okay, this is going to happen. There has been work, like, for example, there's some of the work I'm doing for this one company, very much believe in their mission. We have a several year history. And I knew I wanted to. And in that case, like, I applied for a job. I didn't get the job. I lost out to a better qualified candidate, which I was finally at peace with. Then few months later, they reached out to me. And I was at a point where I was like, it was like, I don't want this anymore. I don't care if I get this or not. And then they come find me and I'm like, okay, that's God's will. And so, but I found that I won't make a decision unless I go to one mass now. That's
nice.
I need to experience the Eucharist one time before I make a decision. And it's very, I'm getting the ability to make a decision quicker. Or another example, I teach at a Catholic school on a part-time basis, but one of the parents had this book idea that was on her heart during adoration, and she has this vision for it, but she's not a writer. And after I took my class to adoration in the afternoon, which I never do, but because of the schedule was hectic in the morning, we couldn't make it adoration in the morning, and so I went, and then I sat behind her, and she was like, at the end of the day when we're out, dismissing the students, she came up to me and she was like, "Hey, I feel that God was giving me a sign." Like, she was asking for how to put this in fruition, and you sat behind me with your class.
Wow.
And she asked me, and so she laid this all out. Would you be willing to do a children's book? And I'm still discerning that, because I'm like, well, I have thought about that, but I don't want it to be solely because of my worldly ambitions to say I, am published, or to have that in print, but I have had that ambition, I have, desired that for many years.
Oh, nice. And given a desire to the Lord, and he's going to make it come true in his time.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
so if you'd be willing, you've mentioned ADHD. I've seen it on your page, and you mentioned it a couple times here. And this is something that I have not gotten to explore on my podcast yet, is discerning marriage with a neurodivergence. So obviously you have that ADHD diagnosis, and so you can't compare it to not having it. Like, I understand that. But I'm curious if you are aware, even with your cousins, your friends, other people, of any uniquenesses that came in your discernment process because of this neurodivergence. I think there are so many people out there who have ADHD or autism or any of these different neurodivergences, and it could be so helpful for them to have a resource to know, like, some things that are helpful and beneficial to make a good, solid discernment.
Sure. I was diagnosed when I was 7 years old.
Okay.
So, and my wife wasn't diagnosed until like last year, I think.
Nice.
So I never really thought of the term neurodivergent until a few years ago. It finally became like a thing, I guess, in society, mainstream, as more of an official term. But it does, I think, in hindsight, make sense that individuals that are neurodivergent will think in a different way than neurotypicals. And so, to me, I mean, for my ADHD, it's exhibited in, like, basically I have to, like, force myself to slow down my thought process. I can go on tangents. I've gotten better as I've gotten older. And I've also found that people with ADHD, they're really paired well with people that are autistic. People that are autistic, I think, forces them to slow down. And they're paired, and there is a component where there's a crossover where if you have autism, you might also have ADHD. So my oldest son, Noah, was diagnosed when he's 4, and so he has ADHD and an autism diagnosis. So he very much kind of exhibits, both characteristics. Sure. But my younger son, he's autistic too, and he does have some ADHD, but it's not quite as, like, overt or as, like, energizing, I guess is the right word. I don't know.
Sure.
The right.
Manifest differently. Yep.
Manifest, yeah. But they pair really well. And I've noticed that, like, when I work with individuals that are, autistic, in work in a variety of ways, and even with my children, especially my younger son, I am forced to slow down. And I don't know how to describe it, but it is very interesting. And, like, the way my wife thinks, and, like, I think that we very much are in lockstep on a lot of things.
Nice.
In just our approach to life, like, but it's hard to describe. Like, I never really came, in that moment of discerning. I knew I had ADHD, but I wasn't, like, I didn't think of it, like, as I would now through that filter. So it's kind of hard to like come back. But in hindsight, it makes sense, like, that I was attracted to her because of, the fact that she had ADHD. It was a factor. It may not have been the main factor, but it's definitely a factor that was not insignificant. And I think, if you, and now in 2025 and beyond, like, people are more and more, like, overt, I think, about, referring to that neurodivergency that I think in 2010 and prior to that, there wasn't as much direct conversation about it, or, you know, in an overt way, I think. So
Absolutely.
yeah, I hope that makes sense. I mean, it's
Yeah,
not
that's
like,
helpful.
yeah. And, um, and we also have to understand, like, when ADHD doesn't manifest in the same way with each individual. It's kind of like a
Right. That makes
spectrum
sense. Right.
where there's certain things where when I hyper focus, I'm like, I have to, like, I'm very much zoned in on that. And I think, like, Catholic theology is one thing that I'm always hyper focused on. And
Nice.
that's, I think, a huge reason why it can be, like, where I've been able to grow my Instagram account and blog, is because it's an innate focus that I can't turn off really ever.
Yeah.
And knowing that, and, like, there's certain drives and it ebbs and flows, and knowing that with your spouse, and knowing that with someone you're dating, or even friends, knowing that it's not something that you can turn off. It's not a condition to cure either.
Right.
It,
Right.
it's just,
Yeah.
it's just the way someone thinks differently. And there's certain strategies you can use to kind of slow yourself down and work through that, and be, mindful of what with your significant other or friends, or, anyone that is close to you that is diagnosed, or maybe suspect is diagnosed. And so, I think just being mindful of that is very helpful. And just, looking back, there was, I was on, like, like a 504 plan, which is like a plan that is in schools for ADHD. So I don't exactly remember what happened, what my teachers did, but I think having that diagnosis probably helped me
Oh, for
out
sure. You had the support. Yep. To be able to thrive in an environment that isn't necessarily set up for the uniquenesses. Yep.
Yeah, so I think that helped, and helped me with social skills, and so on, as I grew up, with that. So, I think it's very important when you get, I'm a huge proponent of early diagnosis of anything. It's better to get diagnosis as early. And, anyone that's concerned that's a label, I would then push back with this and say, it is a label, but don't you want accuracy? Isn't accuracy about truth? And it's not a crippling truth. Never puts you in a cage. It's only,
Nice.
if anyone ever thinks that it's a cage, it's not. It's just like the Catholic Church teaching on morality or theology or liturgy. There's a guideline. It's just like a soccer field. There's guidelines. There's lines in the field. The soccer players aren't in a cage. There's lines in the field to accurately play the game. And that's why there's lines within, theology, Christian morality, Catholic morality, to make us free. In the same way, like, having a diagnosis for ADHD, or really any medical diagnosis, or, neurodivergent matter, it's all about providing some accuracy. So, like, and my wife is a special education teacher too. So I think that has been another driving force. Like, that's her calling. It's she was made for that role, because it was through her studies that helped us discern to then diagnose our kids and get them the help.
Nice.
And so I think that her tenacity, her zest, like, those are skills, those are personality, temperaments that I was drawn to, that, like, then feed into her work as a special education teacher, and as a mom and wife.
That's awesome. All right. So as we're wrapping up our time, this has been so fun. I would love to hear one practical tip that you have that anybody who's listening can use to discern marriage today. They can immediately implement it. Is there anything that you want to share?
I say go to prayer. Just and when you have that decision, like, make a decision and go to the Lord with it, with just a great fervor. And so this is something I wish I did more when I was younger, but, like, go to Eucharistic adoration.
Nice.
Bring yourself
Nice.
physically before the Lord when he's exposed in the Blessed Sacrament. That's the greatest wisdom. You might not get the answer right away, but you will get an answer. You'll get peace. And to know whether you're called to be married or not. And to know that the answer that you desire may not match what he wants, but to dispose yourself to his presence. You're going to align yourself with his will in a quicker way, in a more seamless way, more natural way. And when I say quicker, it's not going to be instantaneous, but it's this both and, where your will is going to be naturally conformed. You're going to be transformed with him, and then just like be conscious and praying throughout the day. That's the main thing, is just be very conscious about praying and asking for his will, and just say that, like, I pray your will be done. And you could have this prayer. I have a desire to marry this person, or a desire to date this person, or a desire to date in general. Lord, is it your will that I date or get engaged or get married to this person, or just in general? And keep going with that prayer, and be open to when he says, maybe you have to shift your prayer to be just general. Maybe it's, what is your will? What is your will, God? Is it going to happen now, or do I have to wait? Just be open to his will. And over time, you become more attuned to his will. It doesn't happen instantaneously. In some cases, it's going to be kind of a quick process, just kind of like how he transforms the water into the wine. It's a natural process of fermentation, that water, when it's in over grapes, gets fermented, but he was able to condense it down in such a way in an instant. And sometimes he'll do that, but he will always transform you when you're in prayer. And the best prayer is the Mass. The next best prayer is adoration. And if you can't go to adoration, just think about God throughout the day. And then I would make a plan to visit him every single day.
I love it. I love it.
Make a prayer, and make a point to try to schedule an adoration sometime during your week. Doesn't have to be long. And it took me 14 years into marriage to actually put adoration into our schedule. It took me 14 years.
Nice.
I cannot imagine how much more fruitful my marriage would be if we did that from the onset.
Oh, I love it.
I'm glad I decided to, but it took me 14 years. So don't be like me and take 14 years to do something. Put it on your schedule this week and make it a permanent fixture.
I love it. That's so great. I think the thing that is so delightful to me about this story is that your handle, your digital mission field, is The Simple Catholic. And this is such a simple, beautiful discernment story. Like, the Lord wrote this beautiful, simple dating story with Jenny. And I'm just, the poetry of those two being the same is just really delightful to me. So where can people find you? People who are watching this, where can they find you?
Oh, yes. Thank you. Yep. And I love how you phrase it, the poetry. I never really thought of that, but it does kind of make sense because of, he orchestrates things in a way that it all tends towards his good. You can find me on Instagram at The Simple Catholic, and my blog is called The Simple Catholic. So you can find me online. I have my website there and Instagram as well. Those are my two main places.
Thank you so much, Matt. It was such a joy to finally get connected in person, on Zoom, I guess.
Yes,
but it's such a joy to get to chat. And I'm so grateful for you sharing your story. And it just has delighted my heart so much. So I can't wait to see what people think about it and how much hope it gives people who are discerning marriage. So thank you so much.
Yes, thanks for reaching out, Elizabeth. It's been a great privilege. I've been, very honored that you reached out, and thanks for finding time to chat.
Absolutely. And all of you who are watching, my goodness, I hope that this has just warmed your heart so much that some discernment stories are really complicated, as you've seen. Some have lots of different, like long pieces and chapters, but some of them are just so simple and wonderful. And it's just, I can't wait to see what the Lord does in your own heart. I hope that you let him light your heart on fire with hope that he's going to write the most beautiful story for you. And until next time, stay close to the heart of Jesus and be not afraid. Bye.